even you can post a comment on there. Let's get to our first story. This one comes from Punch. Speaking about queues, Devo, well, the queues for PMS continue to grow. In fact, they grew worse Tuesday following an earlier directive to shut down filling stations by Ipman. Now, this directive was later withdrawn, but it was observed that the order in some way did trigger fuel queues in parts of Abuja and several states around the region. Now, hundreds of motorists besieged the few stations that actually had or were dispensing petrol operated by major marketers.
Yes. I mean, I think we're going to be dealing with this up until the elections on a daily basis. Unfortunately, the situation is not getting any better nationwide. The first issue on the table right now is the fuel scarcity and how government and the various stakeholders, the marketers, the regulatory agencies, are trying to address this prolonged scarcity because literally it has beaten everybody on every side and there has been no respite. Now, I was in Abuja last week, and the queues they didn't disappear; they only reduced. Okay,
Okay.
so instead of lining up for 4 hours or for 6 hours, you would line up for an hour, right? So we refer to that as progress. Because I remember I called a friend, and he was like, "Okay, there are 10 cars in front of him." That was supposed to be a good position, right? So they resurfaced again back to the 6 hours just within the space of one day
Mm.
with the release of the circular that came out from the Ipman Medugri office, a signed statement by the national chair that they should suspend their services in terms of buying and distributing fuel because the federal government or their stakeholders were not allowing them to um, prosper in the
Mm.
sense that they claimed that the so-called fixed price was coming to them at a loss because of the position they were buying the ex-depot prices.
Right.
Now, generally, so this triggered off a quick chain reaction, I think. And the funny thing is, you see, eventually, well, people say that Ipman withdrew that
Yes.
directive. Some people said Ipman came out to say that it was fake news, right? Or that they asked them to step it down. But the issue is this is to teach you how fast, let's call it negative information, how fast it can fly. Because I
Mm.
saw even that circular being put up on many people's WhatsApp status. People who have no relationship with the business of distributing fuel, they
Right.
were putting up an Ipman notice. Can you imagine? Now, what happened because it triggered off panic buying. Everybody was in a panic mode of, oh, they're not going to be distributing fuel anymore. Quickly go and look for jerry can, etc.
Mm.
I mean, that's how that shows, that goes to show you how delicate this situation is.
Right.
On top of the current scarcity. Now, so the queues were back already in Abuja, and already the scarcity was being felt nationwide. Now, the issue is this: what people need to understand, because I think the marketers have been clear as to where their problem is. You have the MoMA, that's the major oil marketers of Nigeria, like the NNPCs stations, the former Wandos, the what do you call it? The totals, okay,
Mm.
and I think is it Northwest? Are they under a few of the major marketers who get the agreed subsidized price at the depot? So it comes to them at maybe between 160, 170. So with that, they're able to supply at sell at the 185, 195 that was prescribed.
Mm.
Now, Ipman, that's the independent marketers who own majority of the stations nationwide. That's the independent petroleum marketers. They have about 80% of the stations around the
Mm.
country. They get it at different depots from 200 to about 220. So when they buy at that rate, at depot rate, by the time they add their transport to it and all the other charges, it's obviously not going to come at 195 at the station. So this is where their grouse is. Now, obviously, exploitation has been taking place during this season because I don't see how the regulatory agencies are going to monitor over 5,000 stations nationwide. Okay,
Right.
so that's where you now see the variance in price in some places I mean, in Enugu, we saw it at how much was it going for? 340. In
Mm.
Asaba, the station we bought was at 290. That was just one station.
Okay.
And right in our front, they told us the fuel had finished. We had to now go down the line, look for, and it was now going for like 320. And they told us that inside the town, it was going for 400, 500.
Wow.
In Abuja, it was going at, I think some stations had about somewhere 340, somewhere selling at 250, and then black mark was clearly from 400 naira
Wow.
and above, depending on how bad you need it,
Mm.
will determine where you either queue or you quickly buy and get along. So it's a real issue nationwide, and Ipman withdrew this directive, saying that they were still in talks with NNPC and the regulatory agency, that's the Nigerian Upstream and Downstream Regulatory Authority. Now, as of last week, they had mentioned that they would be coming up, they were muting a new price. And this is the issue. Can they come up with a price that is, let's call it, agreeable to all parties? That's one.
Right.
Two, we know the issue here is the subsidy. The subsidy obviously is not going round. So, will this new price, there's a balance that
Mm.
has to be struck. I think in all this mess and frustration, do I believe that Nigerians are ready to pay a new price? I think so. Because, I mean, if you look at the other side of madness that we've been facing, there is no point. In some locations, I think that was up country like Kogi, and when you're heading towards Benue, they sell at 340, 400 at the pump. And people just go and you buy your fuel, you leave. And in some cases, people even complaining that the pumps were not properly calibrated. So, can we agree on a price so that we can end this madness? For those who are trying to politicize it to say that, oh, it's all about uh, trying to disgrace one party or the other, I don't think so. We had this problem all the while. If as long as we're importing fuel,
Mm.
if the subsidy does not get to the marketers to ensure that they buy at a regulated price, then they can't supply at the fixed price. It's as simple as that.
All right, so let's move on to this day. The president yesterday met with the chairman of the Governors Forum and Kebbi State Governor, as well as the CBN Governor and the chairman of the EFCC, Abdul Rashid Bawa, who, by the way, I was reading a court in Kogi State. Okay, just let's move on to the subject. Now, Emefiele has assured that the CBN would not allow itself to be used or to be seen as an agent to frustrate the forthcoming polls. And this meeting, of course, is still based on this naira scarcity that
Mm.
most Nigerians are experiencing.
You know, when we started this
Mm.
administration, we had a twin bomb problem, which was insecurity and the economy, right? Now we've shifted base. I mean, you can't even imagine that something would top that, right? It doesn't get as bad as insecurity and the economy. Now we have another issue on the table. We're dealing with scarcity of fuel and naira, which
Mm.
is literally nobody wants to hear anything because you need fuel to move and to power your business. You need your own cash to be able to survive and stay alive, right? It's just incredible how we survive in this country. Now, here we see some moves by a certain pressure group, that is the political players in the likes of the Nigerian Governors Forum. Initially, they had planned a meeting with APC governors had planned a meeting with the president, but I think that was shelved for this meeting, whereby their representatives, that's the president of the chair of the Nigerian Governors Forum, the Sokoto State Governor, that's Aminu Tambawa, the chairman of the Progressive Governors Forum, that's the APC governors, that's
Mm.
the Kebbi State Governor Abubakar Badugu, the Central Bank Governor Emefiele, and the EFCC chair, all hobbled up with the president in trying to address this matter. And like we've always said, the way they dealt with COVID and had daily meetings with the
Mm.
SGF, why couldn't they have addressed every problem and issue we have in this country the same manner?
Mm.
I mean, I don't know. Do we commend them for this? Because we've had the scarcity issue, we've had the economic crisis in various states, we've had all manner of issues in this country. We've not seen them this charged up ever. But they were with the president yesterday, and the details didn't come out. But the little we heard was Emefiele reassuring them that this Naira redesign policy was not meant to stifle the elections. One. Two, that was seconded by the Minister of Information, Lai Mohammed, who in a scorecard series forum did say that those who are attempting to politicize it with some hubris coming from other parties should seize that this redesign policy was in line with best practice, and that there would be attempts to ease the scarcity both on the naira side as well as the fuel crisis. Now, remember, there's a lot of, let's call it higihaga and bruhaha taking place all at the same time. 24 hours means a lot now in Nigeria. Like I
Right.
said, a notice came out. By the next day, there were queues everywhere in Abuja. Now, in this instance, there was also, because of this naira scarcity, there was also a suit in court by three state governments, Kaduna, Kogi, and Zamfara, to restrain the CBN from, or would I say, from to ask the CBN to extend the deadline,
Yeah.
right?
And then
Beyond,
there was another suit
yes, there was
that
another
compelled the
suit
CBN to
that, not
not.
to extend the deadline, to maintain it. So, I mean, the how do I say it? The heat, the temperature is really getting hot. I don't know. We're getting to the point that there's no longer water boiling. So, what do you have left? I mean, either the pot starts to melt, but it's really, really getting hot out there, and we want to see an end to this.
All right, let's go on to the messages. Thank you, Adedakbo, for that. The live stream is up and running, so you might want to refresh that page so you can catch it. Kenny says the key issues, I believe, in the event of the money scarcity is that the monies are stored in the banks for the big wigs, those who do not need to come to the banks. They control the bankers and have requested the money be kept for them. The only solution is to make the EFCC and the CBN sack any bank manager who has new notes found in their banks, and that bank also pays a fine to CBN. I believe that in 3 days, this naira scarcity will end. Let's take a quick break and we'll continue the conversation on the other side. This is Freshly Pressed.
First Bank. You Music is that soul healing vibe that transcends you with lyrical grooves, lifting you into love as you flow through.
Okay, he said it was.
Life, my music is frequency. Love music, love life. You're listening to my muse.
Enter with your change. Enter with your change because me I no sabi marry person. Oh, that's why. Ah, yeah, I don't say
Maybe
it
it's
because I
from
don't
his
get change.
end.
We show you this one. We are take. And my number be that.
Hey, what nonsense? What jabberjantes? The effrontery. Hey, do I look cheap to you? How dare you?
Hey, Barney. See English show. Me, I know they toast you. I know get interest. And my first money wallet account be that. I beg transfer my money give me.
Oh,
Okay, so we have the
sorry, my bad.
hope we can reach story 5. Where are
Okay.
we?
We're going on to 3 now.
Okay, 3, 4, 5. Okay, we'll tie that together
Okay.
because they're all nice.
Yeah.
Or dial *894*1# to enjoy boundless transaction with
Oh, 5 is quite different though. That's the education one.
Yes, yeah,
Oh,
that's
okay.
what I'm saying. It's
All right, so we'll kind of merge 3 and 4.
First Bank.
Bless them with the face, bless them with the pretty mind too. I may look like her, but we're not the same, mind you. All the things I'm saying, I'll spit in your mind, mine too. Call it mental gymnastics or better, call it mind food. You can find your mind when you let the music find you, right here on Smooth 98.1. This is Miss Eva Johnson, and don't you touch that dial.
You're listening to Freshly Pressed on Smooth 98.1. We're looking at the news coming from Nigeria and we want to hear what your thoughts are, or at least read them. The WhatsApp number is 0809 4440981. And you can also tweet at Smooth981 and catch the live stream on YouTube. It's just search for Smooth981 on YouTube. It's Zibi and Devo here this Wednesday. All right, we're going on to the next story coming from The Nation. Now, banks in parts of Lagos shut their doors against customers seeking payments following the CBN cash swap policy. Now, in town planning Lagos, a particular bank shut its gates as early as 9 a.m. to customers who couldn't carry out their transactions. Some of the visibly upset customers accused the CBN, the governments, the banks, and external forces of plotting to frustrate the forthcoming general elections.
Yes, it's still part of the crunch and the breakdown of this whole narrow scarcity. I mean, if you had 200,000 stashed and you've used up 150, you're going to start feeling the pinch when you can't get that replenished, and that's the case with typically the average Nigerian, those who go to the bank daily to actually take the little that they have. So
Mm,
what we've seen around Lagos, and it's not just Lagos, other states are joining into this scenario, is this insecurity now taking place at banking branches, and that's not a good sign because I
mm,
think yesterday there was a very viral video of bank staff having to scale their own fence just to get to a point of safety.
right.
And we've seen a lot of angry customers, irate customers, taking out their frustrations, in some cases, assaulting bank staff. Is it a surprise? No. Should it be done? Not at all. Because, yes, there are pictures where it shows that maybe there are some errant bank officials who hid money, but that's not to say that the larger global banking position is to
Mm,
actually frustrate their customers. No, not at all. However, um, what has happened in this situation is that to forestall that as a point of safety, branches that don't have cash any no longer have chosen to shut down. Do you understand? To avoid any.
but doesn't this deprive other customers of carrying out the activities that they normally would do, even if they're not coming to withdraw?
Yeah.
And then when you have the ICPC raiding some of these areas and
Hmm.
arresting senior bank staff who seem to be hoarding this money, is it in some way an indictment on the banking sector?
Well, that's why I said there are a few bad eggs. We recognize that they've been exposed. However, um, the larger majority, the real issue here is the supply gap, okay? Just like we're seeing in the fuel scarcity. Once there's shortage either in supply or like Ipman did, they were not willing to supply, you will see this crunch happen immediately. So has the CBN given the banks the volumes that they used to give banks to ensure that there's fluid flow of cash. No, it hasn't happened, and that is why what do you call it? CBN in their rationing, because we do understand the objective in
Mm,
their rationing. I think they need to gauge the demand better and issue more cash out there to ensure that the banks have sufficiency to supply. I mean, I went round banks yesterday. I saw the horrendous queues outside at the ATMs, just like the CBN governor had instructed. Many of them had set up canopies. How long would those canopies keep people down? At
mm.
some certain point, some banks have even reduced or put limits on their amounts that you can withdraw. In some special locations, 50K, some locations, 20,000, some locations, 10,000. And I heard in some locations, if you're using another bank's ATM, you can only collect 5,000.
Mm,
So it's really gotten and you gauge how much people actually require
mm,
for their daily need and business. So this and in some banks they had to bring about security presence. Now when it gets to that point, that's when you
right.
start to say OTO. You know, it's get the pressure is really getting high, and I'm hoping that the CBN can pump up supply nationwide to ensure that this rationing
Mm.
of people's own money ceases.
And we're already seeing situations where people are now protesting Ondo State, Ogun State. In fact, a few days ago, there was a protest in
Yes.
Ibadan as well. Um,
Both the fuel and the naira scarcity frustration all in one basket. So it started in Edo State. I remember I saw that myself.
mm.
Youths, angry
Was this a
youths,
peaceful protest?
in some locations. In some locations, wasn't peaceful because they blocked the roads,
Mm,
and you know that passage through Benin is a major transport
mm,
angle
yeah.
for trunk line for a lot of supply trucks and all of that. So while some people had to follow the bush, which is another danger, some just had to park until there was intervention by the state government.
Mm.
And in Edo State, they blocked the roads with burning tires. Now, in Ogun State, there started just 2 days ago. Angry youths were protesting the shortage of the fuel supply and the naira scarcity by blocking major roads again, putting up bonfires, burning tires, etc. And sometimes they block the roads and ask vehicles, oncoming vehicles, to actually pay money to pass. And you don't want that breakdown of law and order.
Mm.
So police had to come out on the scene in Abeokuta to kind of disperse some of the protesters. It also started in Ondo as well. Now, like I said, you see, this thin line of patience doesn't last too long. At a certain point, government needs to act fast to actually break these supply gaps in cash as well as fuel. Because at some point, when people cannot, when they get frustrated to a certain point, they start to think in animalistic ways. And this is what we're seeing happen on the streets. Honestly, it shouldn't get to this point.
Mm.
It can be controlled, and I think the government needs to act fast before it gets to a point that it becomes very embarrassing.
Gary Newton says, we keep talking about cash scarcity, which to me is uncalled for. I did go to the market on Monday without cash, bought items worth over 50,000 naira, and even came home with some cash. My neighbor's wife goes to work every day, takes two buses, but I don't hear her talk about cash.
Gary lives in Lagos, right? Even those in Lagos suffer it.
The BRT and other government buses have payment cards. If we all sit back and observe, we'll notice there's enough cash for our minor daily transactions. Okay. JP says the CBN really needs to hold up her head in shame. Since the 15th of December, they haven't been supplying cash, and where they have been, it's been short. Mint does not have capacity as well. Really sad. This could have been avoided for cash and petrol. Obi Michael says, I see a lot of drama people act on the internet concerning the Naira scarcity. Have we thought of what will happen if those and others who are not joining in release their frustrations? Since the scarcity of Naira, I haven't used the ATM and the POS. I survive by friends who sometimes get cash and I collect from them. I'm okay. I still cannot get enough cash to even pay my workers. This is bad. Adiola says, please note that the greatest index to possible economic depression is for depositors to get to their banks and they can't be paid. Let's go on to the next story. Again, the WhatsApp number is 0809 440 981. And this is from the Middle Belt. The Plateau State government has handed over 32 missionary schools to their original owners as it marks Plateau Day and Forgiveness Day as well. Now, the governor speaking while handing over the schools in Rang Pam Stadium in Jos said the action was taken to fulfill his promise and appreciate the faith-based organizations for their critical role in the development of the state. Now, he urged schools to comply with the directives of reciting the anthem after the national anthem to enable them to get acquainted with it.
Yes, this is one, what I call it, a good story that we can actually emulate, and hopefully other states can come to terms on it. The Plateau State Governor, Lalong, they were celebrating their Plateau Day and Day of Forgiveness. And one of the hallmarks was that the governor announced the relinquishing of the faith-based schools back to their owners. That was the Christian schools. Now, he also released the state's logo, anthem, symbol. It was like some kind of rebranding day for Plateau. And he said that in their 47 years of existence as a state, they were looking at levels of higher reconciliation and coexistence. This was the objective that they were trying to achieve. Now, these 32 missionary schools that were handed back to the original owners should have helped through the collaboration of the clergy as well as the traditional rulers to ensure proper education within their states. Now, he said this should serve as a model for other states. However, let's look at the reference here. I don't think it's so much of a model for other states, but more or less, let's call it northern states, because we've seen Lagos and Anambra take this same action, whereby state government had, what I call it, aggregated or what's the word? They had um, taken over the management of some of these faith-based Christian schools, but
Mm.
eventually they saw that they couldn't handle it as well as those schools. So Lagos and Anambra have been
River State
states,
as well.
River State as well, who have taken this action to hand them back. And one of the key points there is you can see the mess that took place in Kwara State because of this faith-based issue in terms of the wearing of hijab, and
Mm.
whereby they brought religion into the tutelage arena. Now, the thing is this, right? We're struggling with having enough schools. Then you now politicize the schools by way of religion. So if you have enough schools who are run by faith-based entities, it creates opportunities, options for parents to be able to take their children to. And we've noticed that these faith-based organizations have a, let me not call it a calling, but their service delivery in terms of education is top notch. And this is some of the standards that we require to come back to some of our primary and secondary schools education to ensure our students come out fully empowered. So, like he was saying, this was a model for other states. I'm actually believing that other northern states may take cue on this and ensure that they hand back if they've not done this prior to this time. I mean, education cannot be sacrificed on the altar of silly and futile religious arguments. We need the best and we need it now.
All right. Chibuzo says relinquishing schools is good in theory. Notes these schools now become private and I assume will attract fees. The people need to monitor to ensure that these funds are moved to help push up existing schools to proper standards and an accommodation can be made for those who can't afford the fees. Philip says the problem about Naira scarcity is that all of the money that makes it to the bank due to petty trading has been forcefully taken to the banks and the amount of liquidity is required in circulation. And this one, okay, I can't see a name, but it says if liquid cash withdrawals can't be processed, can the banks at least ensure the apps and the USSD codes are functioning? It's tiring getting debited for failed transactions that barely get reversed by banks.
Now that is the clincher there,
Chris.
and I failed to mention that maybe in Lagos talks we'll talk more on that. It just seems as if the so-called alternative to cash, which was supposed to be the electronic platforms,
Mm,
have been failing. Now, from the banking point, they've been struggling. However, some fintechs have tried their best in this season to take an opportunity. There's been a trending fintech platform that has been
mm.
receiving
They're
enormous
working
praise.
hard.
They're really working hard. They've crashed their transaction prices. And I think that's where the bank should be so that at the end of the day, what's really happening is that the claims that they made prior to this time are being tested.
Mm.
And by your own experience, you will either say it's working for me or this platform is not working for me at all.
All right. Well, that is all the time that we have for Freshly Pressed this morning. Thank you so much, Devo, and thank you for listening. Do stay with us. There's a lot more to come on the Smooth Breakfast.
First bang. You
Right down.
first, first, first.
The stories,